Universities are actually just groups of people sharing ideas. And you could draw a completely different map of the universities of Britain based on shared ideas and interests, which would bear no relation to the geographical location or to the existing structures, you know. So these institutes that get formed are actually just collections of people.
Someone very wise said to me once that you've got to think of universities like their own planets. And within those planets, there are countries, there are counties, there are regions, and each institution will be different.
For me, the most important thing is about, unsurprisingly, the people.
I'm Steve Williams, and I am the University Librarian and Director of Library and Learning Services, which covers a range of activities from traditional libraries to working in partnership with the Institute for Digital Culture. We're lucky in some ways. We get to work with so many students, with researchers, with academics, with external partners, with the community. So we sit at the heart of the campus, we invite people in, we go out, and it's just a really nice place to be, really. So the digital tools start to change the way that we do things, and we've seen that massively accelerate right up to the present day now with the introduction of artificial intelligence and large language models, how that is going to change how we query data and how we can read and understand data. So whether we're talking about text or handwriting, whether we're talking about images, whether we're talking about 3D models of Egyptian artifacts, whatever that content is that we're looking at, digital is all part of it, and libraries exist to make information available to our users. So all of the forms of this information that we can make it available in count, and the more we can make material discoverable and accessible, then we're in a good place, and we support that research endeavour, we support family history, we support all of the kinds of activities that people out there want to take place.
So basically it makes total sense to have this institute embedded within the library.
Yes, and it's helped us clarify some thinking as well, and understand things in ways that we maybe hadn't thought so carefully about before. So it's given us an opportunity to explore. It's an opportunity for us to sit back as the library and say, okay, what hadn't we thought about? It's always nice when somebody points out something to you that you go, that's really obvious, but it's really important, and we'd never thought about it. The Institute has been here for a relatively short time so far. I'm delighted that all of this came together and we were able to host the Institute here. I think for us now the challenge is to make the most of that. So I've learned quite a lot from working with Ross and others at the Institute. Our role now is to amplify that and go, okay, these are the good things that the Institute is bringing. How do we make that normal? How do we get that to reach out into the wider communities? How do we maybe bring in some of those communities who have differences that we're not aware of that normally stop them coming into our building or stop them accessing information in a way that we take for granted? So yeah, I think it's a journey that we're on, and I think it's the start of that, and there's plenty of space and for us to explore in the future. It's a legal requirement for authorities to provide public libraries. Universities couldn't really have survived without the libraries, and then the needs of bringing the digital in just came naturally because institutions needed to provide that sort of digital know-how. Libraries were an obvious place to do some of this work, and quite often you find that early adopters hang around in places like this.
I'm Clarissa Wilson. I'm a postgraduate research student. I'm getting my PhD here, just started in September.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm one of the Future 100 scholars for the university.
Could you say just what that means, the centenary scholarships?
Yeah, so the centenary scholarships, or the Future 100 scholarships, those came out sort of at the 100-year mark, and honestly, I really respect the university for this. You know, as kind of a celebration that we've been here 100 years, that we are a public university with a very sort of democratized history. It was crowdfunded, which seems very ahead of the curve now. They, instead of doing something big and flashy with architecture, they gave out 100 scholarships. I started out with digital storytelling, looking at sort of very broadly, how does digital storytelling enable people to diversify their stories, to be heard, to be included in the heritage sector? I looked a lot at sort of what technology we were talking about and what sort of stories that might mean. And while it's early days still, right now it looks like I'm going to be looking at fictive identities and the creation of them in the heritage sector. You know, when we are trying to empathize, when we're trying to look through someone else's perspective, what does that do for the way that we accept information? You know, the more we kind of sink into that other self, either through prompted questions in the museum, through a living history angle, something like that, how does that change how we look at the present, the past, other viewpoints? And the more I kind of looked at that, the more I realized there were a lot of other fields that have really valuable insights for us in the heritage sector that we should be kind of drawing together and making not really a best practices guide, but just a vocabulary to begin to have those conversations. You know, being here, especially being here right now, right at the start, I'm really enjoying sort of, it's more of a lab environment. It's something where people are sort of coming across each other organically while they're working on their things. There's sort of a knowledge exchange there that maybe doesn't happen if everyone's in their own office. That sort of interaction is really wonderful. And if I had been making a wish list at the beginning of the semester when I started, that probably would have been on my list. This may end up being a total word salad because I'm not sure how to answer it.
I love word salads. All good.
So I see digital culture as being kind of one part of the digital humanities spectrum, let's say. This is a new frontier in a very real way. This is an aspect of culture that just did not exist 30 years ago. I know that one of the first mentions of the internet on television at all is actually kind of cutely in a 1995 Friends episode where Chandler meets a woman over the internet and begins dating her. It ends up being someone he knows in real life, so it's kind of a strange situation there, but mostly what you need to know is that in one of the scenes he is on his very bulky 90s computer and I think it's Phoebe who asks what he's doing, and he says that he's on the Guggenheim Museum page while chatting with this woman, and it's kind of their version of a date at the art museum. And I think it's fascinating that, you know, this sector and kind of this exact topic are one of the first mentions of the internet in television, and B, I think it really shows how far we've come. You know, there was such potential even just in that sample interaction of we can connect with people, we can see things we otherwise wouldn't have seen, we can make new ways of interacting. If I have to pinpoint sort of a genesis of digital culture, it's probably moments like that. Moments where people were beginning to realize, you know, this isn't just a tool, this is a space, this is a forum. But, okay, it's a forum in that it's a web forum, and it's a forum kind of in that bigger, more classical sense of this is where new ideas can be made and debated and constructed and enacted.
So my name's Andrew Fletcher. I'm the director here of Attenborough Arts Centre, which is the public-facing cultural venue at the University of Leicester. and we run visual arts programs, exhibitions, performance programs, learning programs, and then university programs working with university research, teaching and student experience. So we're public facing, but we're very much of the university and want to integrate ever more closely with the university, because I think the potential of arts and cultural organisations within universities is so rich with potential. We are a partner with the Institute for Digital Culture. The Institute, as we understand it, supports the culture sector in its digital work and ambitions. So as Attenborough Arts Centre is one organisation within the culture sector, we look to the Institute for that support and guidance, to be challenged, to see how we can connect to that bigger sector-wide conversation about what digital is. But then we hope that we have something to offer the Institute, and they can look to us as being on the campus right next door. We hope that they'll look to us to engage in practice and to work with artists. And if we think of ourselves as artist-led, what could that mean for how the Institute happens on the ground here in Leicester? And obviously the scope of the Institute is national and international, but I think we've got a role to play right here in the city. We would hope to identify what our best practice is, but also how we want to develop further. And I think the exciting thing is that we have a track record in many different aspects of arts practice, I guess, contemporary arts practice, but there's many other things that we'd like to develop. We have worked quite a lot in digital before, particularly during the pandemic, where we pivoted a lot of our programs online, and really thought about, particularly through our learning programs, how we could bring our existing participants with us through the pandemic, and we engaged with them on a weekly basis and worked out how to modify our workshops to make them work online. So it was transformational for us in many ways. And now, sort of post-pandemic, thinking about what's the legacy of that, and how do we think about digital in this sort of new world.
What are your hopes for digital culture? Or cultures, if you like?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think we want to focus on being a hub for contemporary arts and working with living artists, and really embracing the contemporary and the future. And I think digital can really help us in that way, because it is future facing, it's the unknown, it's the zeitgeist. It's great to embrace the excitement around that, and also being part of the university, seeing ourselves as a centre for research and innovation, so we support so many artists to create new work, which is articulating ideas in new ways. And I think digital can really help us do that in form. So again, there's an excitement around the possibilities of digital. Attenborough Arts Centre has also been a centre for accessibility and inclusion right from the beginning, and I think digital offers this potential for thinking about what does accessibility and inclusion look like now, whether that's for people who can't come to the centre for whatever reason, if they can't leave their home or they can't travel, you've got a far greater geographical reach, but also maybe people who don't come to cultural organisations or what is seen as establishment cultural organisations. If people are intimidated about engaging or just don't know that we exist, how can a digital offer potentially reach people in new ways without them having to come to the venue? It's sort of interesting thinking again about it's an Institute for Digital Culture, but to what extent do you need a physical location as well? So I think physical location is good, and but it can exist in multiple places. It can exist at Attenborough Arts Centre, it can exist in different locations on campus and across the country and internationally as well. So I think there's a real value in it being able to scale in all sorts of different ways. I think there's a real great potential for it to get stuff done, and I know a lot of people have talked about that being a central priority to really make that real world impact, to identify what are the issues that everyone's grappling with, debating, needs evidence for, needs help and guidance to explode the question, or the Institute can really provide that research expertise and guidance and that challenge, and that will be really valuable. Together with all the partners with the Institute, we can together influence policy and policy making and think about how to make that sector change. So if you're asking those key questions that need answering, the Institute can really bring hopefully the right people to the table, but also be thinking about who's not around the table, who needs to be brought into the conversation. But I think that's the role that an institute can play.
Yeah.
So I'm Professor Ross Parry, and I'm the director of the Institute for Digital Culture. That's half of my job. And the other half of my job is I'm Professor of Museum Technology in the School of Museum Studies at the University of Leicester. So 0.5 on each, 2 roles. Thinking about what digital culture is gets to the heart of us making a very clear pitch to what we're for and why we should exist. So, we need a good answer when people say, what on earth does that mean? We spent a lot of time. We actually did some market analysis, as we were putting our vision together and our business case together. And we looked at lots of institutes. We looked at about 50, 60 institutes around the UK and around the world. And we, what are they called? How do they use this vocabulary? How big are they? What's their scope? Where are they positioned within their university and so on? So we really try to understand what others are doing and how might an institute in this area at Leicester be different or actually be consistent. What we saw is that word digital gets used in many different ways. In some institutes around the world, it is actually talking about a very particular piece of technology. It's an institute of, we have a VR theatre, or we're particularly good at scanning, or we're particularly good at particular a data analysis approach. And so the Institute is a brilliant platform to leverage and harness the possibilities with that technology. So sometimes it's very specific. In some institutes, that word digital is used really widely. It can mean computing, but it can also mean a society that has an inflection of digitality within it, and it's the non-computing things as well. Equally, that word culture, we noticed, got used really diversely. Sometimes that word culture could mean the culture sector and something very, very specific. Sometimes that word culture could mean the cultural, creative life, the arts within a particular society. But then what we also saw is that for some of those institutes, the word culture was almost a synonym for society, for life, just being alive and in the world. So we had this really big kind of matrix, literally, an XYZ matrix, and we were thinking, well, where are we? What's our definition of digital going to be, and what's our definition of culture going to be? And we settled on something that goes a bit like this. In terms of culture, we don't want to be an institute of everything. We want to be an institute that's actually focusing on something very clear. And for us, that means the culture sector. So we are actually an institute of undertaking purposeful collaborative work with the culture sector. And interestingly, there aren't many institutes around the world that do this. There's a lot of institutes that will do speculative work or more generalized work or work that's inspired by the trajectory of a particular academic, and it may or may not have use or may not have impact for cultural organizations. We're the opposite of that. We start by sitting down with the culture sector and listening. So we don't always tell, we listen. We don't always lead. We want to see what their points of need are, and actually listening to what the needs are from the sector. How does it adapt to a digital world? What does it need to adopt digital technology? What does this whole connected, dataful age mean for cultural organisations, whether it's a theatre or a library or an archive or a local arts centre? How is this new condition, this digital condition, affecting the relevance, role, visibility of those sorts of organisations? We want to help do that. We have 4 ways that we think about defining digital culture. We talk about the culture through digital, whether it's listening to music or being part of film culture or expressing yourself in other creative ways, that we experience our cultural lives. We're part of a cultural life through digital means. So these are the digital channels that we might use, whether it's streaming on TV or your phone or the web or whatever. How we experience culture through digital. But we're also interested in the culture of digital. So those digital spaces, things like, call it social media or gaming culture or whatever, those digital spaces and those digital communities, understanding how they operate as culture and how they might be understood in cultural ways. So culture through digital, the culture of digital, but we're also interested in culture by digital. So the fact that some of our cultural life, whether it's those part of the art world that are digital art and net art, or those part of the filmic world are digital films, or films that are only exist in through digital channels and streaming and so on. Those aspects of our cultural life that are digital in nature. So we're interested in what digital has done to the matrix, to the collage, to the tapestry that is digital. And then there's the final one, because culture through digital, the culture of digital and culture by digital, we can understand those. But we're also interested in culture as digital. So this is us taking mindsets such as thinking about the world as in network terms, or seeing the world in data terms. And what happens when we look at culture and society, but we take a media perspective, or we take a computing perspective, or we take a communications studies perspective on that? What do we notice that's different? What do those lenses allow us to see when we're trying to understand the human condition, but from the perspective of these digital vantage points? So that's our kind of north, south, east and west of what we see as digital culture.
Typical of this kind of thing is a desire for some kind of transdisciplinarity. Mm-hmm. You find that because of the structures that exist in universities, there's this tendency to force you into monodisciplines. There's a whole load of jargon that saves time in research that kind of ring fences that discipline. The problem with this, of course, as we all know, is that the challenges that the world faces are far too complicated to be seen through the lens of just one discipline. You need more than one discipline. But the problem is university structures tend not to enable that. Mm. Despite the fact that every research funding call now, every research council talks about interdisciplinarity. It's a constant cry, interdisciplinarity. And then you look at what actually happens when you try to do something interdisciplinary, and you run into all these challenges and difficulties, that are linked to funding, but are also linked to people's knowledge, to their attitudes, all sorts of things. So the kind of institute that I've founded and been involved in tends to exist to try and encourage, the breaking down of these barriers between disciplines, the getting past the silo mentality, they call it. Our caveat is just because something's interdisciplinary doesn't mean it's good. And unfortunately, what is rewarded is not the kind of thing we do. It's the kind of thing that sticks within the monodisciplinary culture. Yeah. Or at least that's how it appears if you're having a meeting with your line manager.
Are there challenges as well as opportunities of something like this, which is a fairly cutting-edge idea of an organisation/space, being inside a mainstream kind of red brick university? Or is this just basically the right place for it?
I think the official answer is, I meant to say at this point, it's absolutely the right space. Yeah. But anybody honestly would say, okay, number one, setting up something new is hard. At the moment, it's like we're a startup. We started with, ground zero, business case, identifying the resource, identifying the space, building the staff, putting the KPIs together, identifying the processes and systems that need to be in place, putting together our strategic priorities, onboarding, communications, branding, all of those things. Building and kind of the cadence and rhythm of how we're going to work, creating trust within the organisation, building a narrative, thinking what leadership looks like, nurturing all of those new individuals, all those things that anyone that's put together a startup company or a startup organisation, it's all of that. But I guess where we're lucky is, rather than putting my mortgage on the line, actually I've got the air cover and the protective bubble and shield of the university that's saying, take your time to do this. Here's the resource to support you, and actually we've got your back. The university leadership have been extraordinary in the support they've given to the institute. So it is hard. It is hard because you have to build something audacious and extraordinary and complex from scratch. But I guess why doing it at Leicester at this time is special, and why it resonates, and why I'm getting so much support is we're in a reflective moment, and I think we're all acutely aware of our responsibility now that this is our turn, and what are we now building and handing on and passing on for the next century. And so to build something new at this particular moment means that every conversation, every decision, every time we put another brick in our wall of the institute, I think we're very mindful of this act of creation, and we're very aware of us doing something that mirrors this extraordinary act of community building and scholarship that took place a century later. So our centenary moment means that creating an institute now has a particular resonance and a particular import, and I think it means that nothing feels trivial, everything feels quite kind of profound.
My name is Alberto Cossu, and I am working at the University of Leicester as a lecturer in media and communication, and my role at the Institute of Digital Culture is fellow, and I am currently the first supervisor of a scholarship that will start in September 2023, which is about art and blockchain. That's my formal thing, yeah. I'm also a program director here at the University of Leicester of the MA in Digital Media and Society. So the digital is around me, although I'm not entirely sure if I went to the digital or the digital came to me. It's not entirely clear.
Okay.
When we talk about digital culture, my proposal would be, maybe we can call it culture. And I would say they are forever married, I think, digital and culture. They are married forever. If we keep talking about people have orientations, have preferences, have issues, have struggles, and their hopes and their styles to approach it. So what we try to do there, and that's the thing that I like the most about the approach that the Institute has since the beginning, because this was inspired by I think the overall philosophy of the Institute is to be purposeful and being out in the world. And so I went out searching for a partner for the scholarship. And we found an amazing partner called Creative United. They're based in the Somerset House in London, and they do amazing work. I've been to one of their workshops, and they put together, it was about making music production software accessible. And they put together all the meaningful people in the room. They put the developers, teachers, they've put musicians who use those tools. For visually impaired people, for example. So that was really impactful, and I love the approach of trying to not fixing, because it's difficult to fix in once, but being mindful of trying to improve certain aspects of society. You have to put people together. So what we like to do in our for the PhD candidate that we'll select is someone who has ideas, and someone that we can supervise in terms of providing all our skills and transmit our knowledge, and if and when needed, but also having one industry partner on board. I think it's gonna allow this scholarship to be based on actual practice, actual needs, because if you think about art and blockchain, you think about artists and creatives, we think about all the problems there are in the art system and the creative system in the UK, not only in the UK, the gender issue and the ethnicity issues. It's amazingly white, I think, in the UK. all the biases and infrastructures that inequalities that are there. So I think that we'd love that this scholarship could make a difference in terms of providing a new way to understand, to visualize what are the problems that we don't know yet what they are. It could be let's assume art and blockchain and new forms of blockchain sustainability for the art sector remains and goes on, but it's grounded in practice, it's grounded in real life, and of course putting together an analysis of what this technological structure offer us in terms of imaginations, I think, but also opportunities. I mean, the blockchain, let's not forget about it. There are many people who have found interesting ways to use that for funding their own ventures, and for, also in the case of museums, to give a new possibility of linking museum objects to a wider ecosystem of stakeholders or people. So there is a way to open up to the people. So there are many interesting uses. So for me, like people and technology, yes, let's understand the interplay, the production of cultures about it. And if I would say something that I would avoid, that I try to avoid, is this fetishism of the technology in itself. The technology in itself is not going to disrupt anything, I think. I love the fact that this institute is being thought organizationally from the top. They managed to have these institutes exist in sort of autonomous space within the university, in an area where they have more freedom than other structures can have. And I think the fact that they're new and they are free, a lot of trust and respect for the people who lead them, the way in which the people inside can be supported in a very different way in doing what they want to do, right? So I like, for example, the idea that once we're discussing with Ross about, questioning the idea that sometimes we have that, for example, the academic, the lecturer like I am, I have 3 main jobs, which is research, teaching, and admin. And maybe questioning the fact that, if I can do research, maybe I'm not the best person to write a grant, or maybe if I can write a grant, maybe I'm not the exact best person to actually do it. So, making the assumption that, breaking the assumption that we are or we should be all around, but, giving to each one of us, recognizing our own peculiar abilities. There are academics that are excellent at writing successful grant proposals, and there are academics who are not very good. There are great academics that can teach in the most inspiring way, and there are people who are not that brilliant, I could say. So it's a bit about breaking down, probably. I mean, if I could possibly see like this institute or these institutes like breaking down assumptions and create a wave that propagates through the university, I think.
My name is Uzma Johal. I am the CEO and co-founder of an organisation called Threshold Studios that works all across the country, but also is proud to be the founders and directors of Frequency Festival, International Festival of Digital Culture in Lincoln, which is a biennial festival. This is a very special moment because we're here in the David Wilson Digital Studio, and some years back, I can't remember how many, we had a great relationship and continue to have a relationship with the Attenborough Art Centre, and we've been doing some work with them. And I met Ross and the libraries team because they were looking to see how we could make better use of the digital reading library, and actually thinking about how it could be used and how people behaved in the space and what it needed. And so we did a short piece of work and kind of looked to see some scoping of how the digital reading room as a public space could be used for learning, for study, for collaboration and interaction. That project was some time ago, and it looks very different now, actually. But I imagine and hope that it's gone from strength to strength. And I understand that some of the work that we did in those early days has been adopted as an idea around how you develop your other capital spaces across the campus. So that was wonderful. But Ross and I kept in touch, and he was able to share this fantastic news that the University of Leicester is actually setting up a Digital Culture Institute. And for me, it was more than just that, because having had some relationship with other higher education institutes, the founding principles of creating an institute that was with and for the sector and the development of that sector in the future was what appealed to me. And so I feel very privileged that I'm working with Ross in the early days of the setup of the Institute to think about how it might work. And actually, Ross has that. He knows what the vision looks like. He's done a lot of work, and the university's put a lot of commitment into the project. And it's very different to the other institutes. However, I just genuinely believe it's an exciting and pivotal part of our ecology if we can get this right. So I'm just working with Ross at the moment about what the collaborations might look like and just refining some of the architecture to how the Institute might work moving forward. And of course, as part of that, I'm really hoping that I can continue working with Ross from a delivery and activity point of view and a programming point of view, and certainly Threshold as an organisation able to access and engage with what the Digital Culture Institute will be able to do in the future.
What is digital culture? Like, what is it? Evil question. What does it mean to you?
I think it's a holding phrase to locate us. The big word is technology. It's how technology has now become such a core part of our everyday lives, which is the important bit. So digital culture, I think, is a holding phrase. Technology is the key word here, and adoption of technology, and also the inequity that occurs if you don't think through that properly is where I'm interested. So whether that's through digital literacy, whether that's through digital poverty, as creatives, we can get very excited about the ideas. And with technology, we can think it's this piece, or it looks like this, or we'll use this piece, we'll use AI in this particular way, or we will use a piece of hardware in a particular way. But we must always check in on ourselves around the importance of who is accessing and experiencing the work that we're creating. And if we're using technology, not the assumption that everybody will know how to access that experience. For me, it's always been about how we engage communities and make their places relevant for them and how that's reflected. And I think that arts and culture can really play a pivotal role in that. So well-being, community cohesion, more equity, building confidence in our communities to kind of engage in their spaces and places, I think is a really exciting thing. So again, that's something else that I'm at the moment, that's one of the things that's really at the forefront of my mind. Arts and culture has a really pivotal role, I believe, in breaking down those silos and, breaking down some of those divides in terms of inequality, in terms of entrenchment, marginalised communities. And if we can find a way to embrace technology as part of that, then we are all moving forward together in a positive way. That's very aspirational. For an arts organisation to have a relationship with an institution is a very different thing to an arts organisation having a relationship with a researcher or a course or a discipline within a school or a college. That's huge. And that was really a learning curve for me, because for Threshold as an organisation 25 years ago, when we were doing, projects on estates, targeted estate work with pupil referral units and youth offending teams, and whilst training up artists, and then we were in kind of regional policy meetings around kind of investment for the arts and culture, right down to the county and hyper-local levels. It's the same thing, but in a different way. Having the opportunity to understand that you have to navigate the strategic with the delivery is, I think, where as an organisation we might be working in a territory which is not so commonplace. It's really hard, but the reward is big, because what we feel is, as an organisation, then we can create the conduits for other organisations, because we can create those pathways through. So with an institute, and there is that difference. So for me, you know, that relationship with institute, depending on who you speak to in the sector, and some will have far more experience of working with academia and with either the institute or with a school or a college in a particular place, is financial. There is a perception that the arts are poor and the university's HEI is rich. The resource is not the money, the resource is the people. And that can be a red herring in an early doors relationship, an embryonic relationship between an arts organisation and a researcher, for example, or a university or a college, right? And that, I think, is another thing that we have the opportunity to work on a bit more, because that was another eye-opener for me. Well, it wasn't an eye-opener, it was just understanding. For me, always the resource was the people, but with colleagues, it was, oh, that's where the money is. And actually, that's not where you start from. But the bit you start from is really super hard, because the funding can come, you know, all of that can come, but it can take years. It's not just months. And as a sector, we're very fleet of foot, we're very agile, we have to move quick, we have to respond, partly to do with the way our economic model is, and partly because of the nature of the way that we work. You know, maybe if you're in theatre, you might be planning 12 months ahead. For most organisations, they might plan their 3-year activity, but actually for a freelance artist, they might not know what they're doing in the next 3 months. So how do we make sure we don't lose out? And for me, again, that's where I think we could tap into some innovation there, and we could really make a difference.
You can't be people first without going where the people are, and that's technology, and that's being able to see yourself both in kind of a more abstract sense of, this is something that is relatable, this is something that is accessible, and in a very specific sense of, I as an individual am having this experience, and is it meaningful to me? Is it something that I'm going to think about when I leave?